What is going on, guys? So today we're back with another deep dive, and today it's going to be kind of weird because I'm going to try to get used to a different setup. Now, it shouldn't really look any different to you guys, but it's just different for me. I'm seated now. I got a lot of stuff going on. I don't know if you guys remember, but I talked a little bit about my room and like me making a ton of changes to it, and I'm basically like 99% of the way done. So I'm going to be doing a video kind of like updating what the office looks like now and kind of going over all of that. But anyways, today we're going to be looking at Kangaskhan, who is a very interesting Pokemon to say the least. Now, Kangaskhan is a pure normal type Pokemon, maxing out at 2586. But with a 0 on attack, 14 defense, and 15 stamina at level 22, we can actually hit 1497, which does actually yield us the best stat product available to us inside of the Great League. Now, when we actually compare Kangaskhan up against the entire Ferocious Cup, if we look at bulk and stat product mainly, Kangaskhan actually ranks 18th in bulk and 18th in stat product, coincidentally. So that's actually really good. So top 20 on both of those does actually sound pretty good off the bat. Now, of course, all these numbers do derive from our base stats with a 181 on attack, 165 defense, and a 233 on stamina. It's actually looking pretty good. The attack and defense, of course, could be flipped there, but I feel like I say that literally every video. Now, moving on to our moves, this is pretty much what makes or breaks us. So Kangaskhan actually has a ton of different charge moves, so we're actually going to be taking a second to look through these. But let's go over our fast moves first, getting Mud Slap and Low Kick out of the way here. Mud Slap for 2.66 energy per turn for 3 damage per turn, Low Kick for 2.5 energy per turn for 2 damage per turn. So Mud Slap literally just outclasses Low Kick in both areas, both energy and damage, so there's really not a reason to use Low Kick unless you just really wanted to maybe run a fighting type fast move. But I really feel like you could do a lot better in terms of a fighting move than trying to make Kangaskhan fill that role, because Kangaskhan with Low Kick is just not going to be that amazing. I definitely would try to focus on something that maybe has counter instead. It will make your life a lot easier. Now, when it comes to our charge moves, like I said, we do have a ton of these. So we do have Brick Break, Earthquake, Stomp, Crunch, Outrage, and Power Up Punch. So we do have 2 legacies out of those, Brick Break and Stomp, and both of those are okay moves in their own right, I guess. Stomp is kind of useful in some scenarios, not nearly as much in this cup as it has shown in the past, and even in the past it wasn't really Kangaskhan that made use of Stomp, so it's kind of unfortunately not that great. Brick Break, we do see some use out of other Pokemon like Raichu, but it's kind of weird to have it on Kangaskhan. If you already have it, I would say that it's a decent option. Like if for whatever reason you don't want to run Raichu for some extra fighting type damage, or you already just have, you know, like something else that, you know, fills some of the fighting type damage, and you already have a Kangaskhan that has Brick Break, maybe. But otherwise, it's kind of mediocre in terms of its performance compared to some of our other moves. As far as the current moveset goes for Kangaskhan, we do have Earthquake, which always is a great option as far as ground type coverage. It is a little steep to get there with 65 energy, but it does pay off really well with 120 damage, so not too much to complain about. Crunch, of course, is always an amazing move. It's a great dark type offensive move, just amazing. Outrage is actually interesting in this cup because it can hit Shelgon for super effective damage. Then lastly, we do have Power Up Punch, which of course is always amazing. Even though it did get nerfed pretty hard in the last month or so, it is actually pretty good still. A lot of movesets actually still utilize a bunch from it, so it could actually be pretty decent here as well. Taking a look at all these moves, let's actually run through some numbers here. Brick Break is going to be 35 energy for 40 damage at a 1.14, no stab. Earthquake at 65 energy gets 120 damage at a 1.85, no stab again. Stomp is our only stab candidate here with 40 energy for 55 damage at a 1.38. It does get boosted to 66 on the damage for a 1.65 on the damage for energy ratio. Crunch for 45 energy, we get 70 damage at a 1.56. Outrage is 60 energy for 110 damage at a 1.83. And then lastly, Power Up Punch for 35 energy, we get 20 damage at a 0.57 on the efficiency. So in terms of a moveset that really does some interesting stuff, the best one that I could really find was going to be Mud Slap, Earthquake, and Power Up Punch. So it's kind of awkward because we only have 3 damage per turn out of our fast moves, so it's not like we're really hitting for a ton of damage right out of the gate, but what Kangaskhan actually becomes here is with a ground type fast move and a ground type in the charge move, plus a way to basically boost its own attack, you basically become this small little package that can really start to handle a ton of the electric types that we actually have out there. There are some other use cases, but that's basically the biggest one that I can find. There are a couple of other Pokemon that, you know, could take super effective damage from the ground type moves, but the short version of the story is that Kangaskhan actually does really well up against some of the electric types. So let's actually move into some shields, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about some of those electric types when we kind of get to our ripe and rotten section. So in terms of the entire cup, if we actually look at a 0 versus 0 shield scenario, we actually end up with a 28.1%, which isn't that great. I always say that we want at least a 50% there, but you know, we just gotta kind of go with 28.1. Now in the 0 versus 2, we actually end up with a 95.8%, which is actually really, really good. Our 0 versus 2 ends up being a whopping 3.1, so it's not that amazing, but you know, I really strive for at least 10% there, so 3.1 is fallen really hard from that. And then lastly, in the 2v2, we do actually get boosted pretty high up to the 66.7%. So this is kind of the area where Kangaskhan actually has a little bit of footing. If you can basically keep Kangaskhan protected, then Kangaskhan can actually do a ton of damage. Otherwise, it kind of gets sideswiped by some of the other Pokemon in the cup, especially since most of the stuff that we're going to be going up against is going to be neutral damage, or at worst, it actually could be super effective by some of the fighting type moves that we're going to encounter in the cup. So you got to keep it healthy is what I'm trying to say here. Next, if we actually go up against the meta-relevant Pokemon in our shield scenarios in that 0 versus 0, we actually stick pretty clean to the 28% here. So sticking pretty much to our guns the same as we did in the entire cup. In the 1 versus 0, we actually do get a little bit worse though, going to 92% instead of that 95. So we are dropping a couple of percent there, but still pretty much the same kind of performance. Next, in the 0 versus 1, we actually do get boosted a little bit here with an 8%, which actually does look pretty nice. And then lastly, we do have the 1v1, which is a clean 32%. So same kind of story is told between the entire cup and the meta. We do get better once we have our shields in our pocket, but we just don't really like connect with a ton of the Pokemon. So let's actually tear apart the 1v1 shield scenarios and let's look at all the Pokemon that we actually do go up against here. So as far as winning in that 1 versus 1 scenario, we actually have 32% of the meta. So let's tear these down. Alolan Sandslash, Lairon, Raikou, Raichu, Alolan Marowak, Nidoking, Delcatty, and Pachirisu. So out of those, you can kind of see a little bit of a trend here. So Alolan Sandslash is going to have a weakness to the ground type moves. Lairon's going to have a weakness to the ground type moves. Raikou, Raichu, Alolan Marowak, most of these guys are going to have some type of weakness to the ground type moves. So that's kind of what we kind of become inside this cup, is a little bit of a ground type attacker with a normal type Pokemon. So it's kind of weird. As far as our losses though, we do actually have 2 ties, one up against Alolan Raticate and one up against Torkoal, and then we start to lose here. The only electric type Pokemon that we lose up against is Minun, which if you kind of factor in the amount of bulk that Minun actually has, it could actually be pretty understandable there. But as far as the other ones though, we do have Lickitung, Donphan with Charm, Bibarel, Skuntank, Nidoqueen, Piloswine, Furret, Vaporeon, Donphan with Counter, Umbreon, Shelgon, Granbull, Alolan Ninetales, and lastly we do have Suicune. So out of those, it's kind of pretty much a neutral versus neutral kind of situation. Basically, Lickitung is not going to take super effective damage from us, Donphan's not going to take super effective damage from us, and we just kind of fall apart once we get into the nitty-gritty of who can do more damage, because it really does become a neutral versus neutral in most of these scenarios. Donphan with Counter pretty much has a, you know, a leading edge, with Counter being its fast move, but other than that, it basically comes down to a ton of Pokemon that basically just outpace us in terms of how much damage output they can get. So if we actually take that into account and look at the ripe and rotten section, if we actually look at what Pokemon we really would like to pair with our Kangaskhan, even though we can beat a ton of the electrics, it would actually be pretty helpful to have one of those electrics on our side because we do have a big problem with a lot of the water types. So I think Minun or Raichu would actually help a lot here. Minun just because it's one of the bulkier type of the electrics, and Raichu just because it could actually help cover some other scenarios that we will talk about here. And those are basically going to be good up against the water types that we'll encounter, things like Vaporeon and Suicune. We really need to be afraid of those because they can just basically output tons of damage and outpace us in every way. Next, we actually look at Donphan with Counter being a really good option to pair with us. Some of the other Pokemon that we're going to encounter that could actually give us a big bit of trouble would be like Skuntank and Umbreon. Now, Skuntank and Donphan isn't really like a preferred matchup. It's not like you have a huge edge on the Skuntank. You do have a move that will actually do really good up against Skuntank, but it is a charge move, so it's not like you're coming out of the gate swinging. It's just that in general, any kind of ground type attacker will do good against Skuntank, but the fighting type move is actually going to help a ton up against the Umbreon. So kind of the dark type matchup that we're looking for up against Skuntank and Umbreon is going to kind of be a little awkward. So we do kind of want to be wary of that, and I think Donphan with Counter could actually help out a lot. Next Pokemon that I think we should kind of pair with Kangaskhan would be something like Nidoqueen or Lairon. So the reason that we have those is because basically we have a ton of problems up against some of the fairy types that we encounter, mainly Granbull and Alolan Ninetales. And out of those two, I really think that something that has a poison type fast move or even a steel type fast move could actually do really good there. So in terms of what we really want here, it's not necessarily that Nidoqueen or Lairon are the absolute best match for that, but something that can actually be super effective up against the fairies will actually do a ton of good. Like even Skuntank fits this role pretty well because it could use a poison type fast move. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. Now last but not least, we do actually lose to both variants of Donphan. So we would actually need something to kind of help out with that, and here you could basically go with an ice type or you could go with a water type, either one. Basically Alolan Sandslash and Suicune would be kind of what I would kind of focus on, maybe depending, honestly thinking about it now, like in the moment, maybe not so much Alolan Sandslash, but maybe Piloswine would offer a little bit more, just because Alolan Sandslash is going to have a ton more of a weakness to the fighting type moves, which basically I'm deadly afraid of this month. So just kind of keep that in mind because that's going to be a big deal for Kangaskhan. Those Pokemon right here are going to be really, really good, while these Pokemon, you kind of want to stay wary of them just in case you get thrown up against them. It could get a little sticky. But that is actually going to be it for Kangaskhan today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. As always, remember that if you want to vote for the next deep dive, jump down in the description. There is a Discord link in there. Join the Discord. Get to chatting with a bunch of people that are like-minded and really want to talk Pokemon. So thank you guys for hanging out again. I really do appreciate you guys watching. And until our next video, I'm going to go ahead and head out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that, but if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below about the video. I do highly appreciate you guys watching. If you guys want to support me in any way, there are several links down in the description for Patreon, joining the community here on YouTube, or even just directly PayPal if that's your thing. I greatly appreciate everyone's name that's on screen, as you guys have showed some sort of support outside of just viewing the videos, and I thank you guys. You don't understand from the bottom of my heart. So until our next video, guys, I will catch you then.